Hello, Geneva, and welcome to Geneva Works. I'm your host, Kevin Starr. Each month, we sit down with one of our department heads to learn about their role in our government organization. Today, we head straight to the top as we interview City Administrator Mary McKittrick.
City Administrator is basically a corporation CEO that oversees operations on a daily basis. You've got your legislative body, which is your mayor and city council, and they create public policy, they develop laws, and they are the long-term visionaries for the city. And whatever those policies and laws that they enact, then it's my job to make sure that all of our departments work together to get those implemented and then on a daily basis enforced. City Council's job is a larger, big picture, long-range perspective. My job is to make sure that whatever decisions they make, public policy decisions, are implemented on a daily basis. So I'm looking at the micro, they're looking at the macro, basically. That's the difference. They're looking at it from a legislative perspective, and I'm looking at it from an administrative perspective. I actually started in local government about 30 years ago. My first stint was as an elected official. I was elected to a village board as a trustee and served for 4 years, and then ran again for a second term. And during that term, the mayor and the board approached me and asked me if I would be willing to serve as their first administrator. And after some consideration, I determined that that's really where my preference is. My calling is to be more behind the scenes and to do the work as opposed to being out there in front. And so I did that for the elected position for 6 years, and then I did the village administrator position for 4 years. And then I decided that I needed to go back to school to get my master's degree. So I went back to Northern Illinois University and got my master's degree in public administration. And I was working at the Village of Barrington part-time as well at that time. Unfortunately, the City of Geneva created an assistant city administrator position at that time, and I applied for it and was chosen to serve. I served in the assistant city administrator position for 9 years, and with the retirement of the city administrator, I was promoted 6 years ago into that position. Before I got into local government, I was very involved in the community, which is probably how I ended up getting involved in local government with a lot of different local organizations. I was also a part-time business owner at 2 different businesses at different times. So I do come to this job with a perspective from the private sector as well as the public sector. And I might say that it's really not a job. You'll hear me often say it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. What I do is actually 24/7. It's something that I feel like I have a calling for and I have a passion about, and I do it constantly. It's interesting when we talk about the budget because it's actually not a budget, it's budgets. There are about 30 of them, 30 different funds, and they each have to be handled differently depending on what the purpose is. Total is about $89 million for all of them put together. But again, you have to look at the water fund strictly as a business, an enterprise fund. Same with electric. Those revenue streams can only be applied toward those respective accounts and funding mechanisms, the capital purchases or the operations, for example, just for water, just for electric. General fund is a large fund that takes care of most everything else, not everything, but fire, police, public works, for example, comes out of our general fund. General fund this year is about $17 million. Our water fund is about $11 million. Electric is close to 40. And then we have capital fund for our general capital, and that's close to about $16 million that we'll be investing this year. When the recession hit back in 08, 09, we made a strategic decision to really what I call hunker down. We became even more conservative than we generally are. One of my goals was, and the City Council was supportive, was to keep our employees working. However, at the same time, we knew that as we would lose employees through attrition, we wouldn't be replacing those, we wouldn't be filling those positions. So we left a lot of positions vacant as people left. We cut hours. We also cut back on some of our policies such as educational reimbursement, travel for training, those types of things. We just said we can't do it, and we've gotten a little bit more liberal since that point in time, but we're still very conservative and we really watch our spending. We don't budget a lot in those areas anyway, but the educational reimbursement is still on hold. We still don't do that to this day. We provided an opportunity for furloughs. We went to the unions and we asked for concessions. There were a lot of things. We cut back on capital. We deferred a lot of our capital expenditures. So we just looked across the board to pull back as much as we could without affecting the service to our citizens. Well, we have an updated strategic plan, and right now we're looking at, we've actually hired consultants to look at another TIF district, tax increment financing district, which is a catalyst for businesses coming in within a certain geographic area. So we're studying that right now. There are a lot of capital needs that are laid out in the downtown plan that we just completed last year that we're trying to figure out other financing methods and how to fund those. City Council wants to look at the space needs of City Hall. We've been talking about it for 10 years. About 10 years ago, actually, we had an architectural firm come in and we did a study at that time, and they determined that we have about 10,000 square feet at City Hall, and we need twice that to house the 22 employees that we have here, along with parking and along with the meeting space for our public meetings, as well as storage space that we need for our documents. At that time, the City Council decided that they didn't want to make plans for an addition to this building or a new City Hall. And so the current City Council has picked that up again and said that they want to look at that so that they can determine long-range facility planning, particularly for City Hall space needs. This building was built in 1912, and at the time the council determined that it would last 50 years. They paid about $15,000 for it, and they hoped that it would be large enough. So they've gotten their money's worth out of it, I believe. And so right now the City Council's decided that we need to look for the next 50 years into the future and determine what our needs are and how we can fulfill those as far as space needs at City Hall. There are other capital projects that we're looking at. The downtown particularly, we're always looking at how to fund those needs. We always need more parking, or at least the perception of more parking. We're working on the parking deck on 3rd Street. We're working with Metro and RTA on that. We received a grant for that. So we're really just waiting for their sign off and the paperwork to clear so that we can move that ahead. So we're very hopeful that that will be complete within the next year or so. We're trying to complete the 3rd Street pedestrian mall just south of the History Center as well, which was also funded by a grant. And that will be a connection between the Campbell Street parking for our visitors to 3rd Street. So it's a pedestrian mall that connects parking to the high traffic area on 3rd Street, but also a sitting area so that people have a resting place. So those are a few of the things. In addition, we're looking to start expanding our utilities to the east. We have about a 200-acre site out on the southeast side of Geneva that has been projected to be developed as industrial. And it's been projected for decades. However, there aren't the utilities out there that are needed. So we're starting to move in that direction to start to implement some funding for particularly electric. And with the Couts Road overpass that's being done out there right now, being finished up, we think that the timing is appropriate. We think that we'll see more development along Kirk Road as well. That corridor, especially with the Settlers Hill and the Kane County Jail site on Fabian being developed in the future, we think that we'll see a lot more development in that area. So we're looking to extend our utilities and to make sure that we have the capacity needed for particularly business and industrial development in that area. Well, over the years, communications have become more of a necessity than a luxury. Last year, we created a position of communications coordinator because before then, the communications that we were trying to provide to our citizens was really hit and miss. It was either myself or my assistant or the assistant city administrator, perhaps the IT manager. All of us together were trying to post something, send out a tweet, on Twitter, send out Geneva mail on a weekly basis, get the quarterly newsletter out, that type of thing. But we didn't have someone dedicated to that. Since we created this position last year, we've really ramped up our programming on our public access TV. We now have an info line, 232-INFO, where folks can call in and get us information, general information, as well as current event type of information. We send out alerts on an as-needed basis. For example, this past winter, when we had such harsh weather, we were sending out a lot of weather alerts. The Geneva Mail goes out every Friday for those on our distribution list, as well as our quarterly newsletter. We send out a lot of press releases out on a regular basis now. We also have Facebook, which is maintained. And I think one of the most important changes is that we also have an updated city website, which is much more user-friendly, and there's just a ton of information on there. And that is kept up to date on a regular basis, whereas before is when we had time to do that. And now that we have dedicated staff, everything is much more up to date, much more current, and I think that there's a lot more information being provided to our citizens. Well, I'm tethered to my iPhone, so I always have that with me. Probably the best way is through email, because as I said, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. So I always am checking my email. They can call me directly. My contact information is on the city website, which is probably easiest way to get that. So I would say either one of those, or stop in City Hall. I'm here most of the time. And if not, then obviously through either phone or email, and I try to return messages within 24 hours when I receive them. So always, the door is always open, always happy to talk to residents and hear their suggestions or their concerns, either one.
That is all the time we have for today's Geneva Works. We'd like to thank City Administrator Mary McKittrick for her time and insight into Geneva's government operations. We also thank you for watching. We'll be tuning in again next month to see how your local government is working for you.